Don't forget to go back to your first slide.
morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is such a pleasure to welcome you to the driver's seat where we are equipping and empowering you, each and every great person in the city of Houston, to make impact and change in your area, in your organization. And we are so excited to have so many champions, so many people with good vibes and good energy who are ready to make Houston even greater than it is already. My name is Ray Belton. I'll be your host today in the driver's seat, and I'm very excited. This is episode number 2. Our first episode was on leadership and managing change. And I am excited because at 9 o'clock this morning, a lot of you have shown that you can manage some change with the schedule. And you are here and you are ready to go. And I hope that you are excited as I am about what we're about to do today. And so I'm going to get started. These things take so much work behind the scenes, and it's no way that I can start this off without acknowledging some great people who helped bring this together. I want to acknowledge the OD team here in the Office of Talent and Organizational Development. Would you guys turn on your camera and say hello, Miss Oninye Iwulu, Miss Consuela Frazier, and our fearless leader who tries to stay in the background, Miss Denise Weiss. Can y'all give them a wave? All right. They will be supporting us behind the scenes today. So this is an interactive opportunity for us. So we want you to know that in the chat, you can leave questions in the chat. You can make comments in the chat. We'll give you some planned opportunities to communicate back and forth with us, but they'll be monitoring those things. There's also, because this is a webinar, there's a feature for you to use an actual Q&A. Whichever way you're most comfortable, we would love to hear from you. They'll be they'll be managing that to make sure that we get your questions and your concerns or even your comments. You want to add some flavor to what we cook in the day, do that, and we'll be happy to receive that. And then Miss Oninye will actually be sharing with us today. She's officially my co-host. So she'll be sharing some things with you about our driver today. But without further ado, I want to proceed into what we call connection before content. Science actually tells us that we can do better together when we actually share some things before we dive into these deep drivers, that we can actually share some things and get to know each other a little better. And it may feel like, oh, we're just having a good time. But guess what? The science says it helps you to think better and to think more with more innovation and more out of the box, thinking that can actually take us to the next level. So our connection before content question today is: when your team is firing on all cylinders, what's usually the secret sauce behind it? What is it that's going on that helps you and your team to be able to perform on a high level? And I want you to drop an emoji in the chat right now that best describes your experience in the chat to that question. When you're firing on all cylinders, all systems go, you're taking off like that rocket did this week. What is the secret sauce behind it? Is it clear goals and priorities? Is it the right tools and resources? Is it balanced workloads or focused leadership? I have this chat open. I want to see what you guys have to say. Or maybe it takes you a little while to find those particular emojis. Odinye say focus leadership. Stephen, good to see you this morning. Stephen says food. By the way, you can come up with your own answer. I love that, Stephen. Jane says it's clear goals and priorities, and a lot of people are signing on for that. Stephen, a lot of people agree with you on food. Kim says balance workloads, but really all of the above. All right, all right. Thank you guys for participating. Anybody else want to chime in? All of the above. I got a couple of all of the above. And that's how it works, right? It's a little bit. A good sauce is not one note, right? You got to put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it starts to come together. All right, let's see. I love it when a plan comes together. All right, focus leadership. All right, vision. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a couple of more seconds. And while I am, is there a hand up or was that? Let me help. Let me see. Is it Dyla? Are you asking a question? Or were you trying to react and you actually raised your hand? Let me take you off of mute and let's see if we can hear your voice this morning. Do you have a question? Okay. All right. Well, I'll put you back. But we welcome you all the more. We had one more focused leadership. So thank you all. I hope even if you didn't put anything in the chat, I hope you at least got to think about it. What's the secret sauce? Am I adding to the team? What are my team members adding to me? Because the more we think about these things and the more mindful of these things we are, the better we work together. And I think most of us know that it's not one person, one team, one group that's making Houston flow and keep going every day, that's helping us to keep expanding as an example, not only in this region, but around the world. Just look us up. Yeah, we're making a worldwide impact. You're making a worldwide impact. And so I want to thank you all for chiming in with us today. Now, our outcome in this webinar is very simple. When we say that we want to put you in the driver's seat, we need to give you what you need to drive. And so that image is of all of the key drivers that we found in our survey, which is coming up, by the way. I might plug that a few times today. But it is an opportunity for us to share these drivers with you in a meaningful way so that you can go out and use them on a daily basis, that you can start incorporating them into your communication, that you can incorporate them into your practice on a daily basis. So we're really excited about this opportunity. And by the way, we want to hear your stories too. So you can always reach out to me on the side about that. And today's key driver is resources and workload. I know you probably said, Ray, you are excited and you full of energy. We can listen to you all day. But guess what? I want to invite Miss Oninye Iwulu to talk about this driver with you this morning.
Welcome, everyone. Before we go ahead and welcome today's guest, let's take a moment to spotlight the key driver that we're focusing on today, which is, as Ray said, resources and workload. Now, at its core, this driver is about three things. It's about clear goals, so knowing what we're aiming for and why it matters. It's about the right tools, having access to what we need to do the job well. It's about manageable responsibilities, ensuring workloads are realistic and sustainable. Okay. So these aren't just operational checkboxes, they're the foundation of employee engagement. When goals are clear, tools are available, and workloads are balanced, people feel empowered. They're not just surviving the day, they're contributing, creating, and growing. Think about it. A frontline employee with a clear task list and working equipment can serve the public confidently. A supervisor with access to scheduling tools and staffing data can make smarter decisions. A project lead with defined outcomes and a focused team can deliver results without burnout. But when any of these pieces is missing, when goals shift without explanation, when tools are outdated or unavailable, or when responsibilities pile up without support, engagement drops. People disengage not because they don't care, but because the system isn't setting them up to succeed. That is why this driver matters. When we set clear goals, provide the right tools, and manage workloads with intention, we build trust. These aren't just operational choices, they are signals. They say, we respect your time, we understand your role, and we're invested in your success. And that's the shift from work that feels transactional to work that becomes transformative. Because when people feel supported, they don't just complete tasks, they contribute ideas, they take ownership, and they elevate outcomes across the board. So as we move into today's conversation, keep this lens in mind. Whether you're leading a department, supporting a team, or navigating your own role, resources and workload is a shared responsibility. From the frontline worker who flags a broken process to the supervisor who adjusts staffing to meet demand, to the project lead who builds realistic timelines. With each action, the following is accomplished. First, we take ownership of resources and workload at every level. We move from reacting to reshaping, and we drive transformation one change at a time. I am so excited to hear more about this driver from our guest today, and I know you all will enjoy today's webinar. Back to you, Ray.
Thank you so much, Oninye. That was awesome. Somebody help me give her a hand. That was awesome. I I I know after that you have a better understanding of this driver. But guess what? We are not going to say that was great and that's enough. We have even more for you this morning. Aren't you glad you got up and got here for 9 o'clock? So today we are honored to welcome a guest speaker, our guest speaker. I want to say our guest speaker, Director Lisa Kent. She's the Chief Information Officer here at the City of Houston. She leads the City Enterprise Technology Services, supporting nearly 22,000 employees. Thank you. Across 23 departments, her mission is clear: to shape Houston's digital strategy, improve performance, and make technology work better for everyone. Under her leadership, the city is using innovation to enhance the citizen experience, increase transparency, and boost efficiency across government services. She's humble, but she's noticed. And she was recently, in recent years, acknowledged and highlighted as the Golden Gov City Executive of the Year. Just let that sit. Executive of the Year. And today we're honored to welcome our special guest, the one and only Director Lisa Kent. Help me welcome her this morning.
Wow, Ray, what an incredible warm welcome. I'm deeply honored by both you and the rest of the OT and OD team for asking me to speak here today. I'd like to start with just one more slide to to give you a little bit of context about me as a person. So these are some fun trivia facts about me. One of my personal goals was to get my private pilot's license. And I was trying hard to get that done before the mayoral election. Didn't quite make that happen. So I had to do a real hard press right at the beginning of Mayor Whitmire's term to finish that up. And these 4 pictures that I have shown here are an example that we may get into a little bit later, but they're key milestones in that goal. That first one on the bottom right is me on the day that I did my first solo with my sweet little flight instructor who was actually younger than one of my children. She's now a commercial pilot with Frontier Airlines, flying passengers around. That next picture on the top is me and my husband. That was one of the first times after getting my pilot certificate that I was able to fly him around. The picture in the middle is my husband and my mother and I. Last October, for her 87th birthday, we wanted to take her on a special trip. She wanted to go to the Alamo, and we were able to, now that I accomplished my goal and had my pilot license, I was able to fly us there. And it put a ton of pressure on me because who wants to scare the daylights out of their 87-year-old mom? But fortunately, even landing at San Antonio International Airport, all of that hard work paid off, and I greased that landing and she didn't freak out. She had quite a good time. And then that last picture is a trip that my husband and I took last month. It was the farthest we've ever flown together. And that first leg that you see in purple from Houston to Hot Springs, Arkansas, was the leg that I flew. And then we went on up to Appleton, Wisconsin, to go to the Oshkosh Air Show. And so that was one of our big bucket list items that we had been planning for a year. But it also has to do with workload management and work-life balance and some of the very drivers, influencers to the driver of resources and workload that we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about me and we can move on. So as Ray mentioned, and I've mentioned, let's talk about this driver, workload, resource, and so forth. So this is a snapshot of the citywide employment engagement survey where we received feedback from nearly 7,000 city employees. This chart shows data filtered specifically for the resources and workload driver. And you can see, based on the size and the locations of those dots, the biggest influencer, that big red circle, is related to having the necessary tools and resources to do our jobs. The second biggest influencer is that yellow circle, which represents clear work goals and objectives. And I will add a nuance onto that. Not only do people need to know what those clear goals are, but they also need to know the priorities of those goals. Sometimes we get in situations where one may be higher priority than another. And it's really important for us to know what those priorities are. And then finally, there at the bottom, those 3 smaller dots, you'll see, although not a significant weight, they're still important. And that is manageable workload, followed by work-life balance and the ability to manage pressure. And so I'd like to talk a little bit today going forward on what happens when employees don't feel like we have all the things that we need, whether that's the resources, the clear goals and priorities, or the manageable workload. And when that happens, you or your team may feel like these people in these pictures. So like in that first picture, maybe that happens when your boss says, yeah, we're short-staffed, we need you to work triple the load. That might be happening at a time when you have other things going on in your life too. Maybe your child is getting married that weekend or graduating from high school or college, and you've got all kinds of family events planned. Or maybe it's just that your team's workload is consistently more than the team can keep up with, and everyone is having to work overtime, nights and weekends for months and months on end. And that's that person in the middle where you're like, I've got it. I've got it, everything's fine, but in reality, it feels like the whole place is going up in flames. Or sometimes it may be your boss just asks you how you're going, and you're just knuckling down and say, I've got it. But in reality, you may be feeling like you're underwater. And so when we have those situations, it can lead to fatigue, burnout, and disengagement. And so some of the very responses that we got on the citywide workforce survey, engagement survey, relate to employees feeling this way. And so let's go to the next slide and think about, do you recognize the signs of burnout and fatigue? And what are we doing about that? I don't think there's a single city department out there that doesn't struggle with this periodically, especially when we're going through times of significant change. And especially when, even though we've defined goals, what if those priorities end up changing? Okay. So, how can we help? What are the things that you, as leaders and managers of this organization or individual contributors to accomplishing our goals, what can we do about that? One thing you can do is ask for help. And this is something that HITS did just in the last few weeks. I have, and a few of my executive team members have subscriptions to Gartner, which is a well-known global leader in research on a lot of different topics. IT is one of them. And so we reached out to Gartner to have one of their analysts facilitate a workshop on burnout and fatigue. And Matthew Coletti was the gentleman that led that workshop. And I do have his permission to share a few of his slides on the things that he talked with us about and coached us to watch for and do. So if you take a look at this chart and you begin to see these kinds of signs, especially if you see them in people who were previously really solid performers, then you know that you need to immediately begin to take action. That's things like, have you had a surge in preventable errors? HITS, we have experienced that before. We've had on a few occasions had to really just call a moratorium on changes because everybody was working so hard and so fast that we began to make mistakes that we normally don't make. But some of the other signs that you might see is a shift from being normally proactive to now being reactive, firefighting mode, or pulling back from team participation, or suddenly an increase in health and wellness issues. There's a myriad of things on this page, but one thing that is common is when you see those signs, you know you must immediately begin to take action. Another thing to keep in mind is that change, regardless of whether that change is good or bad, can be a stressor. And so in municipal government, we are no stranger to change. It's pretty constant. Every time we have an elected official change over, whether that be mayor, city council members, city controller, we always experience some form of change during those transitions. Also, like what we're experiencing right now with budget constraints, we generally have to make adjustments to our priorities, or like what we had associated with that was the voluntary retirement incentive program, where we had to say goodbye to friends and colleagues, but also those very same people were subject matter experts in their particular part of our business. And so all three of those circumstances can cause us to have to change our priorities and often the workload that goes with that. Another reason why I put those photos at the beginning of this presentation about my pursuit of that private pilot certificate is that even though that was a goal that I really wanted and that was very positive for me, it was an increased workload. And it did cause me to have to do a lot of balancing and juggling. And especially when I had a brand new boss with new priorities and changes to our processes. So it was a real opportunity for me to practice creative solutions and balancing workload and knowing when I needed to make adjustments. So let's go to the next one. This slide is one of the antidotes that Gartner presented in our workshop about burnout and fatigue. And it's a response to the stress that change can create. And one of the most important things we can do as leaders and managers is to increase communications and to really dial in on these three specific ways that we communicate, especially if the changes that the organization is going through are disruptive. So starting first on that left-hand column is beginning with empathy. And note that this chart talks about listening 80% of the time and talking 20% of the time. You want to look for opportunities to have our team members share things with us. You want to start first by not trying to jump in and solve their problem. Just let them talk. Start by saying, hey, tell me more about that. And you might have to say that a few times. You might have to say more and more and more to get people to open up. And then after you hear quite a bit from them, we may need to say, hey, if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like you must be feeling X, and make sure you're giving and getting feedback with them to make sure that you got it right. Sometimes they'll tell you, no, I'm not feeling that way at all. This is what I'm feeling. And then finally, when you get towards a more mature part of that conversation, we should ask them, hey, how do you want to move forward? And make it safe for them to make suggestions or provide ideas about what they may think would make the situation better. Okay. So in addition to that, starting with empathy in these conversations, we need to work hard to be as transparent as we can. Start first with telling people what you know and what you can share. Next, be honest with them about what you don't know. Lots of times, and this happens to me a lot as a director of a department, people want to know all the answers up front. And in many cases, we simply don't have those answers yet. Other actions need to take place first. Maybe the mayor needs to make a decision. Maybe the voters need to make a decision. There's lots of circumstances where we may need more time or data to be able to get to answer some of the questions that employees want to know. And then finally, there may be things that you do know, but you're not in a position to share. And we simply need to be transparent about that. Another way to increase transparency is simply walking around. People have a concern about FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Do your best. And this was something that candidly came up in the HITS part of the employee engagement survey, was that our team members wanted to see more and hear more from the executive team. So one of the changes that we made as part of our action plan is more consistently every single month having an all hands meeting. And now we're doing many more of those in person to begin to show our faces and have a more personal connection than talking only on Teams and conversations like this. And then finally, that last category is focus. And that's communicating what is changing with people, communicating what is not changing to give them a sense of where things are going to be stable, doing our best in meetings to keep people focused on what is the purpose of that meeting. And so these are all things that I found useful and that maybe you will too, in how to improve communications, both in one-on-ones as well as within your team. So let's go to the next one. This is also just a quick one to show focus on what's in that green box. Whenever you begin to see some of those telltale signs of burnout or detachment, this green box is a good reminder of the level of manager involvement that is needed to reverse that. And again, it comes down to communications. You want to make sure you're not under-involved. You want to make sure you're not overbearing. You've got to find that sweet spot in the middle, scheduling time to build that personal connection, monitoring those early warning signs of disengagement, and using some of those antidotes with communications, and facilitating. When they tell you, hey, I need more resources, this is what's impairing my ability to do my job. That's an opportunity for you to showcase your skills as a leader to influence, in many cases, making some changes to get them exactly what it is that they're looking for. And then finally, in this case, sometimes people may have other things going on outside of work. I used the example of my personal increased workload when I was trying to knock out this personal goal. But in other cases, people may have a family member who's sick. They may be struggling to cope with a problem that they're having at home. And this is an opportunity for you to make sure that folks are aware of the myriad of opportunities that the city provides for getting some help with those issues. You don't want to try to be their mental health counselor, but you want to make sure that they're aware of the resources that are available to them. So let's go to the next one. The other thing that we talked about is people understanding and having clear goals and priorities. And so one of the things that in this same burnout and fatigue workshop that we did is asking ourselves, how do we prioritize and how do we communicate with our teams about that? Especially when we had those priorities set and then the priorities begin to change. We have to begin to talk about what are the things we can do to relieve them. So on the next slide, this was another example. Many of you have probably seen this before, the Eisenhower prioritization matrix. I remember it from the old Franklin Covey planner days. It's been talked about in a lot of the Franklin Covey books. But in general, it just helps you mentally organize so that you are focusing on those things that are truly important, and that the things that are not important, you either delegate them or you stop doing them altogether. And so this is a good way to periodically, not only for your own things, the ways that you're spending your time, but especially to help our team members to go through this checklist. Things that are important affect many people or projects if they're not complete, or other things depend on them, or it contributes a lot of value. Things that are urgent are things that, hey, it might be an invoice that needs to be paid, or it might be a renewal of some service that is overdue. It's not necessarily something that you personally have to do, but it is something that has to be addressed. Okay, so this is one of those tools also that is just a good way to help our teams when we're struggling with plates that are overflowing. Next, I'm going to give you just a very short overview of what we do in HITS to identify clear priorities and goals. And I want to emphasize, this is not something that we have necessarily perfected. Some of the feedback that we got on the employee survey is specifically that they needed to hear more from us. And so we're working hard to communicate much more frequently about strategy, cascading down to goals. So let's go to the next chart and look at that one. The way we start with defining what our strategic priorities and goals are is to listen first to our customers. We have IT liaisons, who you might also hear us refer to as a business relationship manager. And their full-time role is to be out there talking to all the departments who are our customers and asking the questions, hey, what are your strategic priorities? What are the pain points that you're struggling with? What are the things that need to work better in your business? Not necessarily technology, right? These could be business processes, but what are the things that need to work better so that you can do your job better serving Houstonians? And another way that we do that is with fusion teams. We're just beginning to experiment with that, but this is where we're pairing technical resources directly with our business customers instead of us IT being on the IT floor and ARA being on the ARA floor. We've now got those teams co-located together, continuously working. And so we get a lot of good insight from what are the things that are popping up that we believe technology can do to help them work smarter and more effectively and efficiently. So after that, you see on this slide where we begin to cascade down that vision, mission, values, and strategic priorities and goals, which are really more business oriented. And we begin to translate those into actual technical plans that might span 4 or 5 years. And then we cascade it down into an actual annual operating plan. Those are the plans that we have very specific projects, key performance indicators, budget, resources that are needed, and that's how we plan out our work. And as we take those annual operating plans, it pushes right down into the HERE plan. This is how individuals should know, hey, how do I contribute to accomplishing those strategic goals? What are the skill sets that I need to be obtaining or taking training on this year to be able to be successful on this project? So this is a little bit about the way that we communicate goals, priorities, and how it affects the individual person doing the job. I want to go to the next slide, though, just to pause for a minute and to get you thinking about this process in general. This is not easy. So when we set strategic plans and goals, it naturally creates a significant amount of change. These pictures on the left are actual Houston pictures, the Budweiser horse and buggy days in downtown Houston. That was one form of transportation. Then you see that intersection, which is Texas Avenue and Main Street, right around the corner from 611 Walker, and the downtown skyline there. Then you see in the middle, that's more modern day skyline for Houston. And then you see on the right where we're headed in this city for the aviation department's plans for the Houston spaceport at Ellington Airport, and this really cool looking aircraft at the bottom, which is called an eVTOL. And there's a lot of different brands. I was excited to get to see one of those in person when I went to that air show last month. But the thing about this picture and what I want you to think about where Houston is going, infrastructure is one of Mayor Whitmire's key strategic priorities and part of his vision for where our city needs to be going. And specifically, when you think about subsets of infrastructure, transportation is one of them, which is what this whole slide is depicting. And it seems like it's almost impossible. When the aviation director first started thinking about a spaceport, candidly, a lot of people thought he was crazy. But that spaceport is becoming a reality. In fact, I believe on City Council yesterday, there was an item about the Spaceport Development Corporation. And those aircraft that are circled around that rendering of that spaceport are going to be capable of low orbital flight to get you from Houston to Dubai in a matter of a couple of hours. Kind of hard to wrap your mind around. That eVTOL at the bottom, for those of you that are old enough to remember the Jetsons, it's kind of like a little air taxi. So in the future, when you think about how you're going to get from Bush Intercontinental Airport or Hobby Airport to the Galleria or to Galveston or to downtown, instead of calling Uber, you may be getting on one of those. And just to bring this a little bit closer to home, the City of Houston's aviation director, Jim Cesniak, told the mayor and the other directors just a few months ago that next summer, when the World Cup is here in Houston, because all of the major airlines started investing and researching in this type of technology years ago, We may be in a position, they won't be ready for prime time yet, but we may be in a position where some of those airlines might even be doing demo flights while our city is hosting this amazing worldwide event. And so what's the point of bringing all this up? This vision casting, imagining what we want our city, our department, maybe even just your work group to be, to provide that better future for Houstonians. It requires change. It requires working through those changes that can be difficult. Usually they are. Sometimes they're scary, but they're almost always exciting. Change, remember, it makes people uneasy. But if we can paint that picture, that vision of where we're trying to go and why it matters, what's in it for Houstonians, what's in it for you personally, it makes that willingness to go through that a lot easier and better. So let's go to that last slide. This is just another graphic that I like, because when you think about working through change, imagine if you were that caterpillar. You're just rocking along, minding your own business, everything seems fine, and then all of a sudden your shell starts to get dried out and cracked. Maybe even some of your guts are squishing out, and you wonder, what is happening? This is horrible. But when you get through that change and you become that beautiful butterfly, and now your whole life and your world is different because your wings have spread and you're up in a completely different vantage point of this beautiful earth that we live on. You recognize that that change and all the things that you went through were worth it. And so one of your jobs as leaders and managers and individual contributors is just to make sure that as we go through and identify these goals and priorities, that we're connecting the dots for people, whether it's one teammate talking to another, or whether it's the leader of the department talking to the whole organization. We've got to make sure that people can see that butterfly moment and feel comfortable talking about the challenges that we're having to get there and working through and solving those problems. Because if you keep your mind on that prize, that butterfly moment, or for me, that reaching that pilot's license so that I can then stretch and do some of these other things, or for you and your work team to accomplish that major project that either saves the city a bunch of money or saves Houstonians significant time, or saves lives by preventing traffic accidents. Those are the things that help people stay engaged because they feel part of something bigger. So with that, I am open for your questions.
So that was a magnificent presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time out to put that together and to share with us. Um, I don't know if anybody else is in agreement. If you're in agreement, give me a thumbs up in the chat. But I thought that that was very beneficial. And I thank you for adding that personal touch and letting us see in real time, that this is not just something that you're talking about, but this is something that you're living. And I think we all need those examples, and we all can connect on the fact that we are experiencing this at the same time. And so thank you all for those thumbs up. I just want to remind you, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm going to start off with a question. Here in the driver's seat, we're saying we want to give everybody that opportunity to actually own transformation in this organization. And so, as you were sharing about, the transparency that needs to happen, the empathy that needs to happen, a very tough question that comes up in OD practice that I want to bounce off of you is, how do everyday, and let me say this differently, because I was about to say every day, because sometimes I think in our minds we think about frontline, but I've actually spoken to leaders on your level who feel the same way. Like sometimes there's this sense of, what if I can't share what my needs really are, or how I'm really feeling, that I feel underwater, um, and you're kind of feeling alone and hesitant about sharing. What would you say to people who may be feeling that way?
I would say two things. One is we do have to work hard to train managers how to have those conversations. So some of the things we talked about on that slide of do more listening than talking,
Mhm.
training ourselves to pull information out of people. That's one thing. The other thing is, I will say, I learned early in my career when I had a situation where I had 19 projects on my plate and I knew I could not be successful in all of them. And so I went to have a conversation with my manager, and I was so grateful for his response. And I can tell you now, in the role that I'm in, I am incredibly grateful when an employee will raise a hand to me and say, can we sit down and talk about this workload? Um, I need help prioritizing. Can you help me identify where one project is more important than another? And there have been some examples also, even in fairly recent years, where we had projects both were really important. One of them was for strategic purchasing division, and we needed to make a decision in order to be successful that one of the projects needed to be put on hold for a few months so that another project could go forward. And it didn't happen without repercussions, right? Slowing down a project like that did cost more money, but having a failed project costs even more. And so this was a good example where it was an opportunity for me to demonstrate to my team that, hey, I hear you and I appreciate you telling me when something is not what I want to hear, but it's what I need to hear. And let me go to bat for you and work with our customer to see if we can work out a compromise. And we did.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. You also shared that you are in response to the feedback that came from the survey. By the way, everyone, the survey is coming out in October. Just another shameless plug. but you used the data from that survey to say we need to be more transparent. And if I heard you correctly, you said you started to have monthly um, meetings, the all hands meeting every month,
Yes.
and you even moved that to being in person. Can you share with our audience some of the benefits that you've seen from that? Has it increased people's willingness to come forward and to share about resources, workloads, or anything of that nature?
I think the answer is sometimes. It definitely has made a difference. I have gotten feedback that people are connecting more because we are having those conversations, and the in-person connection is easier for people to see. Number one, they don't multitask as much. When you're always on Teams meetings, it's a bad habit. Everyone has that habit of you're trying to do multiple things at once. And so you're not really paying as much attention. So doing more in person does help with that just direct connection. I will say that it's still a work in progress, that some people are more willing to trust that they can tell you about a problem than others. And so, as managers, we've got to find ways to make it safe. Again, even if it's not information that you really wanted to hear, it might be bad news, but The thing is, you've got to work together to solve problems. And to solve a problem, you've got to first start talking about it.
All right, thank you so much. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. Consuela, would you share those questions with Director Kent?
Sure, Director Kent. There are
I'm not hearing.
I'm sorry about that. Yes, Director Kent, there are two questions related to burnout. The first question is, when planning projects, how do you account for team capacity and mental well-being to avoid overloading people and risking burnout, including yourself?
It's a very good question, and I will tell you that that's one that in HITS we do have to constantly battle, because there's way more technology demand for things that the city needs than there are available people, resources, and dollars. Okay, so it is an absolute issue. One of the things that we've done is we've created a basically a demand review process. And when the request comes in from various departments to do something, we have to evaluate what resources is this going to require, and do we have them? And how does it overlay with our existing project portfolio? Sometimes we have to do some negotiating to say, hey, that's an important project, but we can't do that one right now. How about this time frame? It's not a perfect process, but that is absolutely what we're working to do. Another example of what we're doing is experimenting with those fusion teams that I talked about, or we're using the phrase center of excellence, but it's in generic terms, it's that blending of the business with technical people from IT. Finding those new ways to work that might be more effective and efficient is another example of how can we balance some of this workload to, in a more iterative way, solve problems rather than a big, long project that might take a couple of years to do.
Great responses. Thank you. Thank you, Director Kent. Okay, I have another question. Again, it's related to burnout. How do employees set respectful boundaries when other duties as assigned leads to extra work, long hours, and burnout without those efforts being recognized in evaluations?
Another good question. I mean, I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that ultimately communications is the way to do it. Another thing that we talked about in our workshop was making sure that our values are clear and that we're adhering to them. I know that people have different personalities, different things going on in their lives, and we've got to be mindful that everybody is not the same. We've got to be encouraging people that when they do take vacation, they need to be on vacation. We all need time to unwind and decompress. And so building in some of those safety nets where people actually can step away and someone else can carry that load while they're out is important. That was another one of the things that even I, when I took that big trip last month, very serious issue came up at work where I really needed to be here for an important city council presentation. But we worked it out. We worked out an alternative approach, and we got my team the support that they needed for that to go forward in my absence. And that allowed me to step away. And so me modeling that is actually good for the managers on my team to see everybody has to take time away and honor commitments that we've made to our families.
Thank you. Ray,
Awesome.
do we have time for one more question?
Barely, because I'm supposed to
Barely.
be at the picture.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, out of
We have to give her
respect,
to
out of
another
respect for your time, we are. But if you do have questions and you want to put them in the chat, we'll make sure to forward them, and we'll handle that transaction to make sure that you can get an answer for that. But thank you so much, Director Kent, for not only giving us that presentation, but taking the time out to answer those questions for us. We know you have somewhere to go. And so we want to let you get there on time. But thank you again so much for helping us today and sharing with us today. It was awesome.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
A pleasure indeed. Have a great rest of your day. Everyone else, I want to invite Oninye back to just give us a quick summary of some key takeaways that we had today before we wrap things up.
Thank you, Ray. What an insightful presentation and interview. Um, what I appreciated was the connection that was made between the 2023 INE survey data and how tools like the Eisenhower Matrix can allow us to analyze the level of engagement in a department or team. This analysis allows us to align engagement drivers like resources and workload, not just to department or team mission, vision, values, and goals, but like Director Kent said, to the mayor's strategic priorities, all the while embedding transparency, effective communication, and empathy in interactions with employees and each other. Thank you again, Director Kent, for leading by example. Back to you, Ray.
Thank you, Odinye. Another awesome job supporting me. I want to say that for Consuela as well. I think you all, we tried to say thank you to her, but I just really want to say that that was an exceptional presentation, an exceptional opportunity to share one of these drivers. And I am so appreciative of Director Kent, but I'm also very appreciative of you to make the adjustment when the time changed to be here today, to be very attentive in the chat. You guys were signing in. I saw employee numbers going in, everything to say, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm about making a change here in the city of Houston. And so I really want to thank you and acknowledge you for that. One more thing that we need to do before we close out today is to let you know our next driver's seat is coming next month. We have another amazing guest. Dr. Crystal Bessix will be with us discussing driving with direction. We'll be talking about the key driver, my supervisor at that time. And so I want to welcome you back. I want to encourage you to bring somebody with you. Put somebody in your passenger seat and bring them on to the driver's seat webinar series. We'll be glad to have you. We have a lot of room in this virtual world for you. Uh, and last but not least, let us know how we did today. We want to thank you for joining us, but we really want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we are honoring our word, like Director Ken just said, in bringing you these tools, bringing you the things that you need to be a change agent in this organization and to help us fulfill our individual, our team, our department, and ultimately our city goals and priorities here in the city of Houston. So please scan that QR code that you see there and complete the survey for us. And we'll be very, very appreciative of your open and honest feedback. Our feelings will not be hurt. We want to be better for you. And so we really appreciate it if you fill that out and do that. And one more time, here's my shameless plug with my 1 minute left. October, the survey is rolling back around. And I want you to know something. Your voice is a powerful tool. There are many tools that we can give you as an OD department, but the one that we can't necessarily help you use is your voice. That's up to you. But we do want to invite you to use your voice. And we want to let you know that will support you as you use your voice. So keep your eyes and your ears open for information about the survey, and we'll be glad to hear what you have to say. With that said, look like I am finished at 10 o'clock on the dot. I want to respect your time and wish you the very best rest of your day. Thank you for driving. Excuse me. Thank you for joining the driver's seat. And thank you for everything that you do to drive transformation, one change at a time. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Let's give a hand to the hostess with the mostest. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this awesome OD team and Director Kent. But as we cue some music while you're doing your evaluation, just show your appreciation for this amazing team. Have a great day and holiday weekend.
Okay, so we can end it. That went well.
Good job, Ray.